The first thing you learn working the graveyard shift at the Frostvale Gas Station isn't how to run the register. It's that the fluorescent lights don't just hum, they weep. A thin, sickly whine that drills into your skull, a constant reminder you're alone in a place that isn't quite right. My name is Alex, and I'm telling you this because no one else will. This town, it's not on any map, and there's a reason for that. I found out the hard way that there are rules here, and breaking them isn't a mistake, it's a death sentence. I've seen what happens to people who forget. Their faces don't just go pale, they peel. They literally peel away like old paint, revealing something slick and black underneath, and they just stand there, screaming a sound that isn't human. If you've ever felt the cold breath of the dead on your neck, or heard the sound of footsteps in an empty room, then you already know part of my story. But you don't know all of it. Not the gas station, not the rules, and certainly not what's in room 6. I'd been living in my car for 3 weeks, a half-empty bag of pretzels, and the last of my pride clinging to the passenger seat like a ghost. Frostvale was just a name on a sign I saw while driving aimlessly, a desperate turnoff from a deserted highway. The air was a crisp, biting cold that seemed to hum with a silence I'd never experienced before. It was a silence that felt heavy, a silence that watched. I applied for the job at the gas station, the only business in town that looked operational. A solitary beacon of sickly yellow light against a backdrop of deep, endless black. Old Man Miller, the owner, was a craggy, hunched figure with a permanent scowl etched into his face, as if he'd just sniffed something foul. He hired me on the spot, didn't even ask for a resume, just looked me up and down, grunted, and handed me a set of keys. "Graveyard shift," he rasped, his voice like grinding gravel. "You work alone. Never forget that. You're alone. From 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. No exceptions." The gas station itself was a relic, the kind of place time forgot, or maybe chose to ignore. The air inside smelled of stale coffee, burnt sugar, and a strange, metallic tang I couldn't place. The floor was a checkerboard of scuffed linoleum, the once white squares yellowed and stained with age. My station was a small, dusty counter, with a sputtering cash register that looked like it belonged in a museum. The only other person I saw all night was Miller himself, a silent specter who would appear and disappear without a sound, his heavy footsteps audible only when he was directly behind me. I'd turn around, and he'd be gone, the bell on the door never ringing. It was the first hint that this place operated by a different kind of physics. I just chalked it up to my lack of sleep and the general creepiness of a small, forgotten town. The first few nights were an exercise in monotony. The occasional truck driver, a few weary travelers who looked like they'd been lost for days. Everyone paid in cash, their faces lit by the pale glow of the single fluorescent bulb above the counter. They never made eye contact, never spoke more than a few words. The cold outside was a constant, gnawing presence, seeping through the cracks in the door and the thin glass of the windows. The wind was another strange thing. It didn't just blow, it sighed. A low, mournful sound that wrapped around the building like a living thing, whispering what sounded like half-formed words. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the mindless tasks of stocking the shelves and wiping down the counter, but the whispers were persistent, always just on the edge of comprehension. One night, I heard a new sound, a sound from inside the station. It was a scratching, a soft, rhythmic scratching that seemed to come from the back room. The one with the heavy steel door that Miller had pointed to on my first night, his fingers shaking slightly. "Don't go in there," he'd said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That's room 6. It's off limits. Always." The scratching was faint at first, barely a tickle against the stillness of the night. But as the hours wore on, it grew louder, more frantic. It sounded like fingernails dragging across a wooden floor, a desperate, scraping plea. I tried to convince myself it was just a rat, some animal trapped in the old building's walls. But rats don't scratch like that. It sounded intentional. It sounded like it wanted out. I remember gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white, my eyes locked on the steel door. The scratching stopped abruptly at 3 a.m., the sudden silence louder than any noise. I didn't breathe. For a full minute, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I knew then that this wasn't just a gas station. It was a place where things were held, where things were contained. And I was the one who was supposed to keep them there. The scratching was the beginning. It opened a door in my mind, a door I had been trying to keep closed, to the possibility that the strangeness was real, not just a figment of my sleep-deprived imagination. After that night, the gas station seemed to come alive in the dark, not in a friendly way. It felt like I was being watched, not by Miller, but by the building itself. The shadows in the corners of the store would seem to deepen and writhe when I wasn't looking directly at them. The fluorescent lights would flicker for a split second, long enough for the entire store to be plunged into a moment of perfect blackness. In that brief moment, I would hear things. A soft giggle from the candy aisle, the metallic clink of a coin dropping in the back, and once, a wet, sucking sound from the cooler, as if something was drinking from a carton of milk. I'd whip my head around, and everything would be back to normal, the light a steady, sickly yellow, the silence pressing in again. The people who came in also started to change. They were still few and far between, but they were different. One night, a man pulled up, his old pickup truck caked in snow and ice. He came in, his face a mask of frost, and walked directly to the back of the store, to the aisle with the car parts. He stood there for a long time, staring at a bottle of antifreeze. I was busy stocking the chips, trying to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, but I couldn't help but notice his reflection in the cooler glass. His reflection was perfectly still, but his hands were moving, twisting, and turning in a way that wasn't possible. They were stretching, the fingers elongating into thin, spidery limbs that reached for the antifreeze, but never quite touched it. I blinked, and the reflection was normal. The man turned around and walked to the counter, a bottle of motor oil in his hand. He paid in silence, his eyes hollow and empty, and left without a word. I didn't even notice until he was gone that his hands were still normal. Another time, a young woman came in, wrapped in a thick wool coat. She was crying silently, her face red and blotchy. She bought a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold them. When she spoke, her voice was a thin, reedy whisper. "Do you hear them?" she asked, her eyes darting around the store like she was looking for something that was hunting her. "They're always whispering. They're telling me to go back into the forest." I just shook my head, my mouth suddenly dry. I wanted to tell her she was just tired, that it was a long road, but I couldn't. I could hear it too now. A faint, distant whispering that seemed to ride the wind, a sound like dry leaves rustling. The woman thanked me, her eyes filled with a desperate, hopeless look, and left. I watched her from the window as she got back in her car and drove away. Not toward the highway, but toward the deep, dark line of trees that surrounded the town. I never saw her again. The gas pumps themselves held their own little horror show. The numbers on the pump would sometimes jump, not just a few cents, but wildly. I'd look at the screen and see it jump from $5 to $500 in an instant, then back again. I'd watch the gas nozzle, half expecting to see a stream of black liquid instead of gasoline. And the sound of the pump wasn't a steady whir. It was a gurgling, a choked, watery sound, like something was drowning. One night, a car was at the pump, but there was no one in it. I went outside to investigate, my heart a hammer against my ribs. I looked in the windows, but the car was empty. I looked at the pump, and the numbers were climbing, even though the nozzle was still in the cradle. Then I looked at the ground. There were footprints in the snow, leading away from the car, not toward the store, but into the forest. They were small, bare footprints. The kind a child would make. The kind a child wouldn't make in the freezing cold. I didn't go any closer. I just stood there, the cold seeping into my bones, and watched the pump count up to an impossible number. Before a gust of wind, stronger than any before, ripped the nozzle from the ground and sent it clattering to the floor. The gas spilled, but it didn't smell like gasoline. It smelled like blood that I knew then that I needed help, needed answers. Miller was my only option. He was the only one who had been here longer than me. He was the only one who knew what was happening. I confronted him one morning as he was getting ready to leave. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. The scratching, the people, the numbers on the pump. This isn't normal. He just looked at me, his eyes two dark pools of endless fatigue. He didn't say a word, just reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn, yellowed piece of paper. "You're a fast learner," he rasped, his voice a dry whisper. "I was hoping I wouldn't have to give you these for a while. But it's time you knew. Time you learned the rules." The paper was thick and brittle, the kind that would disintegrate with one wrong touch. The ink was faded, the handwriting shaky and uneven, as if written by a hand that knew it was writing a final testament. The list was short, but each rule was a lead weight in my gut. As I read them, the strange incidents, the unsettling occurrences, all of them clicked into place like the tumblers of a lock. The rules weren't a set of guidelines, they were a cage built to keep something out and something else in. Rule 1. The bell on the front door only rings once. If you hear it ring a second time, do not open the door. Wait until the sound of a crow cawing can be heard from inside the store. I remembered the silent customers, the ones who appeared without a sound. They were the ones who had gotten in. After the first ring, the ones who had a soul left to sell. I had never heard a second ring, but the thought of it made a cold sweat break out on my skin. The sound of a crow inside the store? That's what I was supposed to wait for? It was absurd, but in the context of this place, it was a terrifyingly logical step. Rule 2. Never look directly into room 6 after midnight. If the door is ajar, slam it shut without looking inside. If you see a red light seeping from the crack under the door, ignore it. The scratching, the metallic door, the whispered warnings, all of it led to this. Room 6 wasn't just a storage closet. It was a prison, and whatever was in there, whatever it was trying to get out. The thought of a red light seeping from under the door made the hairs on my arms stand on end. It was a light not of this world, a light that spoke of fire and pain. Rule 3. You are alone. Never answer if you hear a voice calling your name from the attic. There is no one in the attic. There is nothing in the attic. You are alone. The whispering, the sound like dry leaves rustling. It wasn't the wind. It was the attic. The voice. I had never heard it call my name, but the thought of it made my heart pound. It was an intimate terror, a personal threat. It knew my name. It knew who I was. Rule 4. The gas pumps are to be ignored after 3 a.m. Do not look at the numbers. Do not listen to the pump. Do not, under any circumstances, go outside. The numbers jumping. The sound like something drowning. The footprints in the snow. It all made sense now. The pumps weren't just pumps. They were a lure. A trap. A way for something to get a foothold in my reality. I had been lucky. I had only looked. I hadn't listened. I hadn't gone outside. But the memory of the bloody liquid on the snow made me shiver. Rule 5. The town map on the wall is a lie. Frostvale is not on any map. Do not, under any circumstances, allow a customer to look at the map. I remembered seeing the map, a faded, torn thing, with Frostvale at its center, surrounded by a spiderweb of roads leading to other towns. But I had never seen a road out. The gas station was the only thing on the turnoff. The roads on the map were a lie, a lure, and I could only imagine what would happen if a traveler, desperate for a way out, actually looked at it. Rule 6. If the lights flicker and the store goes black for a moment, whatever you hear, do not look toward the source. Keep your eyes on the counter. The things that move in the dark do not like to be seen. The giggling, the clinking coin, the wet, sucking sound. The brief moments of perfect blackness weren't a malfunction. They were a window for them to move, to get closer, to watch. The memory of the stretching hands and the reflection of the cooler glass flashed in my mind. They were real. I just hadn't been supposed to see them. Rule 7. Never touch the old clock above the door. It tells a different time, a time that is not ours. If the clock stops, the rules stop. And when the rules stop, you don't want to be here. I had never noticed the clock. I just assumed it was broken, stuck at 10 minutes past 12. But it wasn't broken. It was telling a different time, a time that wasn't ours. And if it stopped, the rules stopped. The rules, the one thing keeping me safe, the one thing keeping the world from unraveling. The thought of them ceasing to exist was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Rule 8. If you see your reflection in the glass of the cooler and it does not mimic your movements exactly, smash the glass with a heavy object. Do not look at the reflection as you do it. This was the most chilling rule, the most personal, the most direct threat to my sanity. My reflection had always been my own. But what if one night it wasn't? What if it smiled when I didn't? What if it waved a hand when I wasn't? The thought of my own reflection turning against me, of having to destroy my own face to survive, was a terror I couldn't put into words. Rule 9. If a man comes in and asks for a pack of midnight smokes, tell him you're out. He is not a man. He is a key. and his smokes unlocked the door to room 6. This rule was a hammer blow. It connected the first 2 rules in a horrific, terrifying way. Room 6 was not just a cell. It was a lock. And the thing that wasn't a man, was the key. He was coming. And when he came, I was supposed to lie. I was supposed to deny him. What would he do if I didn't? What would he do if he got his smokes? The thought of the steel door swinging open, of whatever was inside stepping out, made my knees buckle. Rule 10. At 3 a.m., you will hear a faint, scraping sound from the back room. Do not be afraid. It is the sound of the locks turning. It is the sound of safety. This rule directly contradicted the first sound I had heard in the station, the sound of fingernails dragging across the floor. The sound I had been terrified of. The rules were playing a sick game with me, telling me that the sound of my terror was actually the sound of my salvation. It was a twisted, cruel joke, but I didn't laugh. I just felt a cold, deep dread settle over me. Rule 11. If you see a lone car with no driver at the pumps and the numbers are climbing, do not go outside. If you see footprints leading into the woods, do not follow them. They are not footprints. They are a road. The footprints in the snow. The small, bare footprints. They weren't a person. They were a path. A path to somewhere I couldn't imagine. A path that would lead to certain, unimaginable doom. I had almost gone outside. I had been so close. Rule 12. You are not a custodian. You are a warden. Your job is not to sell gas. Your job is to keep the rules. Break one, and you're not fired. You're consumed. The final rule. The one that put everything into perspective. I was a warden, a jailer for this place. The gas station wasn't a business. It was a prison. And I was the guard. A very, very mortal and very, very terrified guard. Miller didn't have to say anything else. The list was a full explanation, a comprehensive guide to my personal hell. He just gave me a final, knowing look, a look that said he had seen it all before, and left. I was alone again, but this time, the word felt different. It didn't just mean a lack of company. It meant I was the only one in the cage with the beasts. The rules, once just a list of absurdities, became my Bible. My entire existence revolved around them. I was no longer a gas station attendant. I was a warden. A night went from a long, boring shift to a tightrope walk over an abyss. I watched the clock, not for the time to go home, but for the hour hand to inch toward 3 a.m., the hour of the scraping locks, the hour when the pumps were a danger. I found myself looking at the bell on the door, holding my breath with every customer, praying I would never hear a second ring. I started to walk around with my head down, my eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the reflection in the cooler glass. I was a different person. I was a survivor. The first rule I saw broken wasn't by me. It was by a traveler, a woman with a small child in the car. She came in, her face a mask of exhaustion, and asked for directions. She saw the map on the wall, the faded, deceptive lie. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her voice filled with relief. "I've been driving for hours, and my GPS died. I must have taken a wrong turn." I saw her eyes go to the map, and a jolt of panic shot through me. Rule 5. I had to stop her. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice coming out in a strangled croak. "The map's it's not accurate. This town isn't on it. It's just for show." She just smiled, a sad, weary smile. "I'll take my chances," she said, and her eyes focused on the map. I watched her, frozen in place, a silent scream building in my throat. I saw her trace a finger along a road that didn't exist. She let out a small gasp. "There it is," she said, pointing to a small, hand-drawn circle on the map. "Frostvale, and there's a road right out of it. It's a short drive to the next town." She didn't look at me, her eyes locked on the map as if in a trance. I saw it then. I saw the map change. The lines of the road seemed to blur and shift, the towns rearranging themselves. Frostvale, once at the center, was now at the edge, a tiny speck on a great, swirling blackness. The woman just smiled, a beatific, empty smile. She bought a pack of chips and a soda, and left, her child still silent in the car. She drove away, not toward the highway, but toward the blackness the map had shown her. I never saw her again. The map was back to normal, but I knew. I knew what I had seen, and I knew what had just happened. A life had been consumed, not by a monster, but by a lie. The next one was a small breach, but it was mine. I was wiping down the counter, the clock above the door showing 10 minutes past 12. It was the calm before the storm, the eerie stillness before the night's horrors would begin. I heard a noise from the back room. A different noise. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Not the scratching, but a gentle, steady tap. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from room 6. Curiosity, a poison I had been trying to avoid, got the better of me. It was before midnight, so the door wasn't forbidden. I just had to not look in after midnight. It wasn't midnight yet. So I went to the back room, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and pushed the steel door open a crack. The room was dark, a pitch blackness that seemed to suck the light out of the hallway. The tapping stopped. I felt a gust of cold air, colder than the outside, wash over me. The air smelled of old dust and something else, something I couldn't place. Something like old memories and lost things. I couldn't see anything, just the endless dark. But I could feel it. A presence. Something. And there was watching me. And then I heard it. A small, muffled giggle. A child's giggle. I slammed the door shut, my hand trembling as I turned the heavy steel lock. The giggle was followed by a soft, mournful sob. A child's sob. I had been told not to look in after midnight, but I had looked in before, and it had seen me, and it knew I had seen it. The rules weren't just about preventing things from happening. They were about a delicate balance. I had upset it. The very next night, the lights flickered and went out. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs, just as the rules commanded. But I heard it. A voice, low and guttural, right next to my ear. "You looked," it whispered. A wet, sickly breath brushed against my neck, and the smell of old dust and lost things filled my senses. The lights flickered back on. I was alone, but I knew I wasn't alone. I had broken a rule, a small one, but I had. The rules weren't a set of suggestions. They were a law, and I had just become a lawbreaker. And the punishment was coming. The punishment for my small breach was swift and insidious. The whispers from the attic, once a distant rumor, became a clear and present danger. They no longer just whispered, they called my name. "Alex, Alex, come up here, it's lonely up here." The voice was sweet and seductive at first, a woman's voice, soft and pleading. But as the nights went on, it grew more desperate, more demanding. It started to sound like a chorus, a multitude of voices, all calling my name, all begging me to come up. "Alex, Alex, we're waiting for you." I had to clamp my hands over my ears to drown out the sound, to keep myself from looking up at the ceiling, from giving in to the temptation. The voices knew my name. They knew who I was. The attic wasn't just an attic. It was a prison for the voices, and they were trying to find a new cellmate. The clock above the door, the one I had never paid attention to, started to run backwards. I noticed it on a particularly long night, the hands ticking counterclockwise, the numbers reversing themselves. It was still 10 minutes past 12, but the hands were moving back. It was a small, surreal change, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. Rule 7. The clock tells a different time, a time that is not ours. It wasn't just a different time, it was a reversal of time. It was the world unwinding itself, the rules of reality bending and breaking. I felt a sense of vertiginous panic. If the clock was moving backwards, what else was? Was I aging in reverse? Were my memories slowly being erased? I looked down at my hands, expecting them to be younger, smoother, but they were the same. The change was internal, a slow, quiet rot that was beginning to eat away at the very fabric of my being. Then came the man who wasn't a man. He walked in just after midnight, the bell on the door ringing only once. He was tall, gaunt, with eyes that were too black, too deep. He walked directly to the counter and looked at me, a smile playing on his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A pack of midnight smokes," he said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. My heart stopped. Rule 9. "We're out," I said, my voice a shaky, barely audible squeak. He just kept smiling, that terrible, empty smile. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice laced with a predatory, knowing menace. "I'm quite sure they're here. In the back. Just for me." He was a key, and his smokes unlocked the door to room 6. I couldn't give them to him. I wouldn't. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice a little stronger this time, "but we're out. You'll have to try another gas station." He laughed then, a dry, rattling sound like dead leaves in a hurricane. "There are no other gas stations, boy," he said, his smile widening to a monstrous, impossible grin. "There's only this one. And there's only me. And you." He looked past me, his eyes fixed on the back room, on the steel door. "Open it," he said, and the command was not a suggestion. It was a demand. A primal, terrifying command that I felt in my very bones. I stood frozen, my mind screaming. He took a step toward the back, and the air around him grew colder, denser, the sickly yellow light seeming to dim in his presence. I saw it then. The red glow seeping from under the door to room 6. He was a key, but he wasn't the only one who could open the door. The thing inside could too, and it was trying. I heard the sound of the lock scraping, but it wasn't the sound of safety. It was the sound of something breaking. He looked at me, his black eyes blazing with a malevolent glee, and I knew what he was. He wasn't just a customer. He was a piece of this place, an extension of its will. "You failed," he said, his voice a triumphant roar that echoed in the tiny store. "You broke the rules, and now you get to be consumed." The red glow from under the door intensified, bathing the entire store in a macabre crimson light. The man started to peel. Not his face, not his hands, his entire being. The skin on his arms started to curl and flake away like old paint, revealing the slick, black substance underneath. He was screaming, but it wasn't his voice. It was a chorus of voices, all of them in agony, all of them calling my name. "Alex, Alex, you let me in." The peeling man, or what was left of him, crumpled to the floor, a heap of discarded skin and writhing blackness. The red light under the door pulsed, a rhythmic, hateful beat. The sound of the locks scraping grew louder, a frantic, desperate sound. The rules were breaking. All of them. The clock above the door was now spinning wildly, the hands a blur. The voices from the attic were screaming my name, a cacophony of pain and rage. The fluorescent lights were a mad, sputtering mess, flickering on and off, the moments of blackness longer and longer, the things that moved in the dark no longer hiding. I saw them. I saw them in the brief moments of darkness. Thin, spidery shapes, their limbs twisting and turning, their heads a featureless blackness. They were everywhere. In the aisles, behind the counter, in the corners of my vision. They were waiting. They were waiting for the rules to break completely. The final nail in my coffin was my reflection. I had been so careful. I had avoided the cooler, avoided any surface that might show me myself. But in the midst of the chaos, the terror, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass of the front door. And it was not me. My reflection was staring at me, its eyes wide with a manic, triumphant glee. It smiled, a slow, menacing grin, and waved a hand that was not mine. Rule 8. I had to smash the glass. But how? With what? I was frozen. The horror of my own face turned against me a paralyzing force. It laughed, a soundless, mocking laugh, and I saw its mouth open. Not a mouth. A black, endless void. I saw myself, my real self, being pulled into it, screaming, my own hands trying to claw my way back. The reflection was not just a reflection. It was an escape route, a way out of the cage for the things that wanted in. And it was going to use me as the key. I felt a cold breath on my neck, the same breath I had felt so many times before. The man who wasn't a man. He was gone, consumed, but his presence was still here. His words echoed in my mind, a constant, mocking refrain. "You failed. You broke the rules. And now you get to be consumed." The red light under the door was now a solid, unblinking glare, a single, malevolent eye. I heard the final lock on the door to room 6 give way with a loud, metallic shriek. The door creaked open, just a crack at first. But in that crack, I saw something. A hand. A pale, slender hand, with impossibly long, thin fingers. It reached out, not toward me, but toward the floor, toward the pile of discarded skin and blackness that was the man who wasn't a man. It grasped it, and with a sickening, wet sound, it pulled the mass into the room. The clock above the door stopped. The hands, a blur of motion just a moment ago, were now perfectly still. 10 minutes past 12. Rule 7. The rules had stopped. The cage had been opened. The things that moved in the dark were no longer just in the dark. They were in the light. I saw them clearly now. They weren't spidery shapes. They were people. People I had seen before. The woman who had asked for Directions, her eyes still locked on an imaginary map. The man with the stretching hands, his fingers now long and spidery, his face a mask of black emptiness. The child, the one who had made the footprints, her face a pale, ghostly white, her eyes two black pits of despair. They were all here. They had been here the whole time. They were the ones who had been calling my name. They were the ones who had been scratching at the door. And now they were free. The red light from room 6 was a blinding, oppressive presence. The pale hand was gone, the door still ajar. The silence was back. Not the quiet silence of a gas station at night, but the deep, bone-chilling silence of a tomb. The air was thick with the scent of old dust and something else, something new, something like victory. I looked at the reflection in the front door. It was gone. The glass was just glass. But I felt it. The pull, the black, endless void was still there, and it was waiting. It was waiting for me. I was the last one left. The last one to be consumed. My purpose here wasn't to be a warden. It was to be the final prisoner. The ultimate sacrifice. The last one to be locked away forever. And the clock that told a different time, was still at 10 minutes. Past 12. The time of my final judgment. The end of my story. And as I write this, I realize one final, horrifying truth. I was never a warden. I was never a guard. I was just the bait.